Hello and welcome in the sixth episode of the Git series, the series where we try to implement Git. And in this episode, we are going to talk about hexagonal architecture. So if you remember correctly, in the previous episodes, we did a bit of business logic. So we hashed a stream of bytes, and then we hash files. And the next piece of business logic are going to be to be able to write the blobs in the Git object directory, to write the tree in Git object directory, and to write a commit. If you want to have a bit of documentation about those notions, I just remind here that there is a bit of more information about those. So when I was reading the code that we wrote the other day, I noticed a problem. The code that I'm talking about is in the HashObjectUseCase. So we have this main method here that basically handles the command, and we have the command to can receive two commands, one command to hash text and one command to hash a file. And then that's the logic of hashing a stream of bytes. But the problem really is in this method. And the problem is here. So here we are using this stream from file name. So this piece of code violates the hexagonal architecture or in port and adapters and in clean architecture. You need to, as a developer, it's important to identify what needs to be in the domain and what needs to be in infrastructure. Usually, everything that is related to a specific technology is in the infrastructure. And actually, here, if we open this diagram that we see in the hexagonal architecture page of Wikipedia, um, we can see what I was mentioning to you. So we have the application core in the middle, and then we have the ports and the adapters. So we can see here that, for instance, for notification, the adapters are technology specific. So SMS, email is the same for the persistence or the administration, business events. And so if we go back here, we are actually here using a technology, which I consider to be a technology, which is the file system. Inside of the domain, we can see here, we are in the domain. So here, that's not correct because one other way to see that is, let's say we want to migrate our software to another technology. So let's say instead of the file system, we migrate to somehow a cloud environment where we want to use S3, this tool to store blobs, which resembles more or less to a file system in terms of interface, at least. Well, if you want to move to such a technology, we would be blocked here. The principle of hexagonal architecture is to isolate the business logic of the software. And here the business logic is really hashing the bytes, hashing the byte of streams. This should be out. So here this should be outside of the hexagon. And here I've drawn a little bit of a diagram here to try to show the intent of what I want to have for the architecture of this little application. So we have the domain here. So there's the model and the use cases. So that's the core domain, but we also need to be able to access the file system and be able to access like the Git object repository, for instance. So we will have interfaces, traits that are going to be defined in the domain, and that's going to be related to a specific technology in the infrastructure. So here, for instance, I kept file system port, which can be kind of a specific technology, but easier to understand. And one thing which is important in this architecture is that the domain has no knowledge about the infrastructure. So there is no arrows going out of the domain to reference anything in the infrastructure. That's very important because we want to focus on our core domain, the core value that the software brings. Infrastructure is not the core value of our software. It's just a way for our software to interact with other applications, other services. Now, how can we fix that? So it's actually quite easy, as I said. We just need to use dependency inversion. And the principle of dependency inversion is not to depend on the detail of implementation, but to depend on an interface. And we just interact within this interface. That's a clever mechanism for the domain to avoid to know the infrastructure while still interacting with it. So here I'm going to create a new package, which I'm going to import, and I'm going to call that FileSystemPort. And what do we want to do from the file system is to get a file, get the string of bytes, read file, bytes, and we are going to provide a file name. We're going to provide the file name, and it's going to return a stream of any throwable bytes. Okay, yeah. So it's going to return throwable bytes. Okay. Now you might argue that if the implementation is something different than the file system, then the file name, well, file name is actually not a great name, not a great naming here. And you might argue that it have a slightly different meaning if we are using, for instance, S3. Let's use specific types here. So I'm going to create a specific type for file pass, or I'm going to call it file identifier. File identifier, which is going to be a case class. File pass. Can we extend an eval here? Okay, so here I'm going to use a more specific type to express what I want in a more explicit way. So when we read this, it's much easier to understand what it does, hopefully. So now we need to use this port instead of this from file name here that is going to go in the adapter in the implementation of this port. So we can use ZIO ZLayer, which is a way to provide a dependency for what we need. So let me see here. So I'm not too sure exactly what's the right approach. I'm going to create a class for the moment, and then we'll see if we can have a better implementation. So I'm going to create this class, Usecase implementation, even though the name is not great. And this class is going to take the file system port. So obviously here we only use what's in the domain. We use the interface. We use the trait here. It wouldn't be allowed, for instance, to use the specific implementation that's going to be in the infrastructure. And we're going to move that up. Okay. And now it's just about, now it's just about calling read file bytes. And so you can see here the file identifier. I'm renaming that here as well. So here there is still the naming file names that is used. I'm thinking if we need to change that to file identifiers, maybe just file is fine for the moment. Okay. So now, what should we do? Val live. So my understanding is that this is kind of a convention where when we want to have like the production version of a layer, we call it live. ZLayer. So I suspect that we're gonna have from function, and we're gonna take that. And we're gonna call new okay, and what's going to change here is that we're going to have to, the way we're going to use it is different here, because it used to be static, but now we need to use that, we need to use the handle command in a different way. Now you see here, this is not correct anymore, but actually what we're going to do is duplicate this line, and we're going to have the HashObjectUseCase here used as a service. Oh, okay. Sorry, so I realize here that I missed something. We are missing the type. Here we're providing the implementation, but we need to create an interface. Okay. So, and the interface is going to be, it's going to take this function, and the class is going to extend that. Okay, perfect. So now we have a type that we need. And I'm going to go back to main. So now we can legally say HashObjectUseCase.HashObjectUseCase. So I'm starting to wonder if the road I took here is the right one. Maybe this subject here becomes redundant. I'm not too sure. If we need to, we'll see if we need to improve that in the future. But anyways, here we have our service. And if I click on that, yeah, we are referencing the trait. And now we can just use our service as we were using the statically before. And we're still going to call this handle command and have the implementation hidden away from us. Oh, that's the I was wrong here. I meant to change the type of the hash file in here, hash file case, to a list of file identifier, and keep the string for the moment for the hash object result. So that means that here we are going to need to wrap file identifier. Now we are using our use case, but we need to provide the layer. So here, if we look at the type, you can see that we are returning a ZIO with HashObjectUseCase and console. One thing to notice here is that this new expert here is something from Scala 3. My understanding is that it's a way of combining types. With the previous version of Scala, in that case, what would have happened is that the closest parent type would have been chosen, so objects probably, or serializable here. But with Scala 3, with this new feature, we can actually have, I think it's called the disjunction of type, and that allows to have several types like that expressed. That's really, really good. But anyway, going back to what we want to do here, we are already providing the console layer here, but now we need to also provide the HashObject use case. Okay, so before going further, I'd like to compile. Just going to run the test. It's just that IntelliJ is not updating here and it's not getting imported, I suspect. So model. Okay. Ah, perfect. That's the error that I wanted to show. So here we can see that there is the lengthness. Okay, you need to provide this HashObject use case here for the program to run correctly. And fair enough, because that's what we saw earlier. We are already providing the console, but we need also to provide the HashObjectUseCase layer. And if I am correct, we should be able to just HashObjectUseCase.live, and this should reference the object that we created, the layer that we created, sorry. So let's see. Okay, so we have a different error. Please provide a layer for the following type. File system port. Fair enough, actually. So we said that we said that the HashObject use case needs the file system port, and we are not providing this the implementation of that. So fair enough. Let's create it. So in the infrastructure package here, I'm gonna create a new package which I'm gonna call file system. And in file system, I'm going to create file system adapter here, which gonna extend the file system port. We can even put an object for the moment. There was the override here. Okay. Okay, override read file bytes. And we said that this implementation is actually very simple. It sets stream from file name, I think, and the file. Okay, so that would be it. Now, obviously, we need to also provide this implementation, this layer here. Because the way here we did it might not be the optimal way actually. So maybe we need to create the object and to create an anonymous function instead and have the layer defined like that. So let's say here I want to create my layer. So ZLayer succeeds. Here I don't need to provide, it doesn't need any dependency here. So I can just say that here is my ZLayer. I don't need anything. I don't need to use from function. And in that case, I can just paste what I wrote before, which is going to be this anonymous class and the implementation that we are looking for. We do need to import ZIO, and if we go back here, we should be able to just provide FileSystemAdapter.live, and hopefully this should be fixed. Well, we still need to import. I forgot that IntelliJ is very slow in this computer. So git infrastructure dot FileSystemAdapter. Perfect. Okay, so the main code is compiling now. We're compiling the tests. Okay, and the tests obviously are failing because we need to implement the same kind of logic in the test. So the test that is failing for the moment is the HashObjectUseCase. So let's go to this one. Yeah, one thing that I didn't mention about this, the problem here is that we don't have a test for file. We just have tests for hashtags here. Even though down the line the logic of hashing is the same, but I would want to have some logic to hash some hash file as well, some tests to cover that. And I realize we don't need that. We can just run main this. This is just the ZIO proxy, is just to like run all the tests if we need. So I'm going to take that off. And here I would think that we can just provide okay, so as you can see here, we do have a provide. So I'm gonna provide the hash system use case live. And I'm also going to provide, so here, this is temporary. Here, this is temporary because this is meant to be a unit test. So theoretically, providing the adapter here is not really what we should do. But I don't have time in this episode to write the tests that are missing and to find a solution to have not to use this adapter. So I'm just going to leave it like that for the test to pass. Eventually, I'll like to change that. While thinking about it, actually, maybe I don't even need to. I'm going to do something slightly different to avoid to put something that works. I'm going to create a ZLayer of, and this is going to be not implemented. So hopefully it should work better. And here, obviously, we also need to change the static call here. Need to do the same that we did for main. So HashObjectUseCase which is ZIO service of use HashObjectUseCase. And then we can change the static code here by the variable. Okay. Let's try to run this test again to see if we are missing anything. Okay, the import here, HashObjectUseCase. Okay, that's a typo here. Okay, now the main is missing. And the main here kind of grew as an integration test. So here I want to provide actually the actual implementation for the adapter. Obviously, having the integration test here within the main, within something called the main spec is not ideal. So this will need to be refactored. I'm just going to copy that and paste that here. But instead of providing a dummy implementation here, I'm going to give the FileSystemAdapter.live and do the right import. Infrastructure system.FileSystemAdapter. Okay. Now let's see if our tests are passing. Okay, we still have a few errors. Right. So here the problem is that we're just providing a partial environment here, but we're using the method to provide all the environments. So the ZIO is like, it didn't provide all the environment that I need. So I'm wondering if I just say provide some, which implies provide just part of the environment, is going to work. Maybe we'll need to give a bit of help in terms of types. So provide some doesn't work. Yeah, we don't need to explicitly say what we are taking out, and those things are, if I just do that, what am I referencing here? Yeah, actually I need to reference. Let's see if we have the same issue. So we should have only one error. Okay, cool. So it seems that it's fixed it. So I'm gonna change the other test as well. Okay, I was like, now the test is passing. Oh, not implementation. Okay, so somehow this is called. So I need to do something a bit different. I'm going to create the anonymous class here. Okay, implement the method and keep the method like that. I do want to use the braces. And keep the method like that. So now, as we are not calling the method, this should pass. Okay, cool. This test pass. Let's try the main. Okay, nice. So both of our tests passes. So if we just recap what we did here, it feels like we did a lot of changes, um, but we just try to put things in the right place. So if I open again our HashObjectUseCase, we used to have all these methods here being static, but what we decided is that the file system um, is not part of the domain. It's a specific technology that we are using. So we want to have the implementation related to this specific technology in the infrastructure package. We used to have reading the file directly in the domain, which I believe was wrong. So in here now, we have a more pure domain because this domain have no reference whatsoever about um, the file system. So the reading a file from the file system. But to do that, we had to remove all the static and provide the dependency here for the port. The port is the interface, the trait that lives in the domain, um, um, and that relies on dependency inversion. And we also have the implementation of this port. Here, it's kind of specific to ZIO, but it could very much be just a class extending this and then just use this class or this object. And you can see that the implementation is very simple to read the file. I've just copied that from the use case. And then in the main difference is that I needed to explicitly say that I needed to use the use case and as a dependency, as a service, and not use it statically. But to do that, we needed then to actually provide the actual implementation that we want to use for this type here that we created and the port. So that's what we did here by in the provide. And that's mostly it for this episode. One other thing is that I wanted to do for this episode that we didn't have time is to actually add a test for the other command that's hash files in order to have a better coverage of the domain. I know it's already covered by the integration tests, but I feel like it would be better to have a test within the domain testing the hash file. And that's it for this episode. Let's go back to the README here. Yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.